We're going to get started. So thank you everyone so much for attending and joining. I know we had tons of interest in the program from a recent LinkedIn post that I sent out, and I think a lot of word of mouth from immigration attorneys and from colleagues and other foreign nationals in your networks. So we're really excited that everyone has been able to find out about the program. We don't do a lot of marketing about Open Avenues, but we love when people come to us and have heard about the fellowship from someone in their network. So thank you for finding us and being here. My name is Danielle Goldman. I am co-founder and executive director of Open Avenues Foundation. I started Open Avenues with my father, Jeff Goldman, who's been an attorney in the Boston area for about 30 years. And we started Open Avenues because we care about demonstrating the fact that foreign talent brings so much value to the United States. And we wanted to create a way for us to demonstrate the value that foreign talent can bring to the US when they stay and work at companies. And we're thrilled to have built the fellowship program, which is doing just that. And we're going to walk through all of that today. So I'm going to start just by walking through a little bit about our team. This is the leadership team here at Open Avenues. We are small but mighty. We have a lot going on behind the scenes, and we do have a cohort of contractors that are working to support us as well. But Jeff and I, again, are co-founders, and Erin, who is on this call and collecting questions in the chat, she is our immigration program coordinator. She's our saving grace to the organization. She's amazing. If you get to connect with her, she's fantastic. Elena is the director of our STEM education initiatives, and she works with RUA to make sure that our fellowship runs smoothly and that all of the students who are connected with our program are getting awesome experiences driven by our foreign national fellows. So this is the team. This is what we're doing. We're on a mission to demonstrate that diverse global talent can catalyze positive outcomes in communities in the United States and the American economy in general. And so our fellowship is designed to open pathways for foreign nationals to contribute to the US innovation economy and train the future workforce. It's a win-win for our company partners, for foreign nationals, and for universities. And we're so excited to dive in a little bit more. But to start out, it's really important that we start by just discussing what the H-1B visa challenge is today. I think most of you on the call know the H-1B in and out. You've done a lot of research. You know the restrictions and the struggles with the system. You also know that it's the most common work visa option. So if you're coming from outside the United States and trying to find a work visa, or you're graduating from school and you're finishing up OPT, the H-1B work visa is typically the next step, but it's on a restrictive annual lottery system, and 85,000 slots are given per year. That's the cap. Super frustrating for companies that are putting in multiple people per year, and statistically, it's just shutting out a lot of foreign nationals from getting those visas. And from the foreign national side, we hear this every day, the amount that you're investing into the United States by going to school here and finding jobs here and working to do that interview process and finally landing that job, only to be experiencing a really restrictive system that doesn't take industry demands into consideration, can be pretty painful. So we feel that, we know that. It's also a reason why we built the program. And lastly, to qualify for an H-1B, many of you know this already, but super important because it also applies to Cap-Exempt H-1Bs as well. You must have at least a bachelor's degree in a specialty field. The Department of Labor has determined what specialty occupations are in the United States, and you must be working in the field in which relates to your degree. So those are the high level overview of what an H-1B visa is. And then I put a screenshot here just to highlight the numbers from this year. AILA just sent out, the American Immigration Lawyers Association just sent out these final numbers posted from USCIS. 483,000, more than 483,000 applicants or registrants into the lottery this year is unprecedented. And they did select 126,000 registrants. I just want to explain that. So yes, it's capped at 85,000, but USCIS has learned over time to adjust for the number of individuals who don't end up sending a petition in. So that's why 126,000 were selected. They anticipate they'll get, the 85,000 filled from that 126,000. So that left a 26% chance of getting selected in this March lottery that just happened. Again, really frustrating for a lot of folks that were shut out, and probably the reason that many of you are on this call today. So let's talk about Cap-Exempt H-1B visas. That's the reason everyone's here. We're really excited to introduce the Cap-Exempt H-1B. If you haven't heard about it, Open Avenues is not the only Cap-Exempt H-1B employer in the United States. These have been sponsored by many organizations in the past. They are not subject to the annual lottery cap. So they're completely outside of the system. You don't have to enter into the lottery when you're working for a Cap-Exempt organization. They can be sponsored at any time of year, filed and approved at any time of year. You don't have to wait till that October 1st new fiscal year to start working on a Cap-Exempt H-1B. You can work as soon as you're approved for one of these Cap-Exempt visas. And they can really get approved in about 6 to 8 weeks. That's how fast Open Avenues is doing them for our fellows in our program. And they have the same qualifications as an H-1B, but they just have to be filed by a Cap-Exempt organization. And I just want to take a pause to remind everyone to please write questions in the chat. Erin will be collecting those, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. So Cap-Exempt organizations, as I said, Open Avenues is not the only one. It might be the first one you've heard of, but there are many Cap-Exempt organizations in the United States. Congress has deemed that there are 4 types of Cap-Exempt organizations. The first, most common, universities. Any university can sponsor an individual for a Cap-Exempt H-1B work visa. So these are given to, typically it might be a tenured staff employee, but it could also be a teaching assistant. Anyone that's working, has a specialty occupation for a university, qualifies for a Cap-Exempt H-1B. Government research organizations, nonprofit research organizations. Sometimes those are, hospitals are a very common nonprofit research organization. They can sponsor individuals for Cap-Exempt H-1Bs. The last type is a nonprofit that is affiliated with a university. So this is where Open Avenues sits. Open Avenues is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is affiliated with 8 partner colleges and universities in the United States. We're constantly trying to build more relationships and offer new universities programming. But right now you can see there's a concentration in Massachusetts because that's where Open Avenues was first founded. Now we're working with companies around the country. And so we're interested and keen on building relationships to offer programming to students that need it most. So we have a wide variety of schools on here, but I will say we have an increased incentive to work and an ambition to work with students who are diverse, coming from low-income households, could really use the support of access to our fellows. And that's what we're doing moving forward. So Open Avenues, again, is a Cap-Exempt organization and can sponsor anyone that works for us for 5 hours per week, at least, for Cap-Exempt H-1B work visas. So awesome. Open Avenues can sponsor our employees for Cap-Exempt H-1Bs, but how does that help companies? How does that help anyone that wants to work full-time for their employer? And we're going to talk about that right now, and that's through concurrent employment. So some of you might know, but you can hold multiple H-1Bs at once. You don't have to just have one H-1B at a time. You can have multiple. You probably won't want to apply for multiple full-time H-1Bs. That won't make a lot of sense, but you certainly can have multiple part-time H-1Bs, or you can have one part-time H-1B and a full-time H-1B. And that's exactly what this concurrent employment structure looks like. So once a foreign national is in Cap-Exempt H-1B status with a Cap-Exempt organization, like Open Avenues, for part-time work, the law says that any US employer that isn't Cap-Exempt, Amazon, Google, the small startup company that you're founding, they can also sponsor a concurrent cap-exempt H-1B for that foreign national. So the baseline is the cap-exempt H-1B with the cap-exempt organization, and you can sort of stack an H-1B and get an approval on top of that cap-exempt employment. But you'll see my note at the bottom that's really important. You must remain employed by a cap-exempt employer to maintain cap-exempt status with your concurrent employer that's not cap-exempt. So USCIS was very, very clear about this, and they put out a clarifying memo that yes, it's true that any employer can also sponsor an individual who's already in cap-exempt H-1B status. But it's also true that you can't just get into cap-exempt H-1B status with a cap-exempt employer and then transfer it over to a new company. You have to stay employed by a cap-exempt organization like Open Avenues if you're going to maintain a cap-exempt H-1B with that full-time employer. So that's where the Global Talent Fellowship comes in. This is Open Avenues' signature program. We are really excited to present this to you. It was in the works for a while, and for the last 3 years, we've been growing it slowly but surely, and we hope many of you will apply. The Global Talent Fellowship is an opportunity for foreign nationals working in STEM or business-related fields to work for Open Avenues for 5 hours per week. And during those 5 hours per week, our Global Talent Fellows are leading industry relevant projects for students at those partner universities we just talked about. And during those 5 hours per week, the industry projects look like what I've written on the side, which is we do 3 types of programming: micro internships, which are the most common, boot camps, which are 10-week projects and alongside one of our partner universities, and in-class projects where we partner with a professor to launch a project in the classroom. Micro internships are actually paid opportunities for students to work with one of our fellows on a project. So the idea is for our fellows to be leading real world, company-driven projects that give students a taste of what it would be like to work in industry. And this is how we show that our foreign national fellows are training the future US workforce to be future applicants at the companies in which they come from. Super exciting model. So let's talk about the pathway. So companies are able to retain foreign talent through our program. Companies nominate foreign nationals that they want to retain, that are running out of OPT, that are coming from abroad, that they would like to have stay in the United States because they're transitioning from a J1 or another visa type. They nominate them for our program, and we're able to sponsor our fellows, if accepted, for a cap-exempt H-1B work visa. Then our Global Talent Fellows are focused on educating students during their 5 hours per week. They're working those 5 hours to launch these projects, and they receive that cap-exempt H-1B sponsorship for working those 5 hours per week. And what we're ultimately able to do is have our cohort of fellows in software development, data science, computer science, market research, finance, all over the board in STEM and business. We're having them launch these experiences and train future leaders in those fields. And so we're hoping that as a whole, between our foreign nationals and our future STEM leaders and students, we're able to fill the talent gaps that are perpetually challenging companies in STEM and business today, and will continue to be an issue for companies in the future. So eligibility, who is eligible for the Open Avenues program? There's been a little bit of a shift in some of our communication around this. And so if you are on the call and you have a bachelor's degree, please take note about these qualifications. Ideal candidates for Open Avenues right now are master's degree students or PhDs who in a STEM or business related field. We have grown quickly as an organization. We've made some adjustments and shifts in the size of our programming, and due to the current size, we have to go through some extra hoops with individuals who have bachelor's degrees. There's just some extra steps that we have to do in the process if they're interested in coming on. So right now we're going to be only selecting individuals who have master's or PhDs In the future, this might change, so stay in touch with us. It's not out of the question, in a few months that we might reconsider this, but given high demand for the program right now, we're prioritizing individuals with those masters or PhDs, and you must have 2 years of work experience in your related field. So if you have a degree in software development, we ideally want to see you have 2 years of work experience as a software developer. Your OPT experience, of course, we know that had to be related to your degree to get approved for that OPT. So ideally, that does definitely count as work experience. We like to see experience mentoring or working with students or peers. If you've worked in any capacity that can demonstrate to us that you would be great at working with students as a fellow in our program, that's definitely a plus. Of course, you need to have a job offer or a job from a US employer, and that job has to be in your field of study. So, if you have a master's in software development and 2 years of work experience in software development, but all of a sudden you want to be sponsored as a biomedical engineer, that's not going to work for this program, and it's not going to work for an H-1B. You need to be working in your field of expertise, which is where you have a degree. We also require that you have a US employer that is willing to sponsor you and nominate you for this program. We're not taking fellows on into this program unless a company nominates you. We're not hiring fellows who don't have a company that partners with Open Avenues. The process and what this looks like. So again, we're taking on fellows and prioritizing fellows that have a company that is going to nominate them for the fellowship program. So the employee nomination is on our website. Employers can go ahead and nominate employees. We also encourage all foreign nationals to go onto our website and do the application process. It's a quick form that you fill out, and it just helps us get in touch and send you more information that will be helpful for you to bring to employers. So if you're looking for the materials to send to your employer, we have some tips on how to discuss it with your employer that will be sent to you if you go to our website. And Erin will post the links to both the company page and the fellowship page in the chat, and you can go ahead and fill out the form and send your employer the nomination page. Once an employer nominates you, Erin and I go ahead and as consultation is scheduled, we have a conversation about the program with the foreign national and the company, or just with the company, whatever everyone's comfortable with. And we move forward with those cases if interested by the company. And we do an evaluation at that point of the specialty occupation to make sure an individual is qualified for an H-1B. And we have a screening call where we talk through your experience and why you're interested in this fellowship. This is not just an immigration solution. This is an actual workforce development training program. And we want to make sure that anyone that's coming into our program is genuinely interested in training the future workforce and launching our industry projects with students. So let's talk about the burning question of how do companies actually participate? So there is a financial commitment from every company that participates in our programming. We have 100% of this financial commitment must come from the company. If that is a problem, we can talk about it, but that is all of our company partners pay for the fellowship and sponsor their foreign national for our program. So there is a fee due upon contracting with Open Avenues and starting our fellowship. This is a $16,000 one-time fee. It includes Open Avenues Cap-Exempt H-1B, the government filing fees, premium processing. We have additional government filing fees based on the current size. So if you notice that this price actually went up from a month ago, it's because we've increased in size, we've changed in ratio, and we of US employers and foreign nationals, and we have an extra fee that we pay the government for that. So that's why the $16,000 upfront has shifted. And we also include some work that Open Avenues does to scope the projects and get them placed at universities and do the programmatic work. That's all included in the initiation fee that companies pay up front. And then this is really important. Everybody in our program is in the fellowship for a different amount of time. Some of you might have OPT expiring in December of this year. Well, then you're really looking at entering into the lottery in March. And if you win, you're only in the program until October of the following year, right? So you might be in the program for 8 months, whereas someone might apply right now and they're in the program until the following October. That's about 1.5 years. So to maintain the program for everybody, we have a quarterly fee that's due from companies. And that quarterly fee is $3,500 per quarter. It includes all of the educational programming that we put on, and it allows us to pay students stipends and administer our programming and provide ongoing immigration support to our fellows. So those are the program fees. Again, everybody is in our program at a different time. We do this on a rolling basis, and everybody exits our program at a different time. Our goal is to get everyone into the program, have an awesome opportunity to launch educational projects with students. So there's a 6-month minimum. And then we want everyone to have their next step on their immigration journey. So we will help you think about green card options. We'll help you think about, is an O1 extraordinary ability something you might qualify for? And we certainly make sure every one of our fellows enters next year's lottery. The last piece that goes into a contract with a company is called the salary share. This is not a fee. We separated it out to demonstrate that, but it is a financial commitment that's in the agreement. Every employer of an H-1B candidate in the United States must pay the fair prevailing wage as determined by the Department of Labor for the employee. Open Avenues is not exempt from that. If we're hiring someone, we have to pay them the fair wage. So the way that we do this is through a share. The full-time employer is still going to pay out what they offer, and Open Avenues is going to subtract 5 hours per week of the fair prevailing wage for the specialty occupation from that total, and we're going to pay that portion to the employee. The employee is going to get their full paycheck just from 2 employers, and the employer is going to pay out that total amount, but a portion is going to go through Open Avenues Foundation. So that's how the salary share works. All of our employees right now are working 5 hours per week, getting paid 5 hours per week by Open Avenues, and working full-time for their employers and getting paid for that portion through their employer's payroll. And benefits are all going to be from the full-time employer. So here are our company partners right now. There are 35 partner companies. I believe there are less than that on this website, on this slide, so I need to update some logos, but we have some awesome company partners from around the country. I think we're working in about 15 states right now. And we have 100% approval rating for all of our fellows in 2021, hoping to continue that trend in 2022. And we're really excited about the folks that have come on board. Usually we have 1 fellow per company, but we have worked with about 4 companies to sponsor 2 or 3 even fellows from their companies for the program. If that's the case, we've done a discount on the 2nd and 3rd employees, just to make sure that this is something that employers can do. But you'll notice that the size of these companies is not massive. So we don't have companies on here that have, typically when I can get in front of a leadership team, when I'm talking to the chief people officer or head of HR or a CEO of a company, that's typically an indicator that we'll be able to move forward with the program. But if we're looking at some of the largest companies in the United States, it's really hard to introduce a unique immigration solution or even a unique program that helps 1 employee, but not all employees. So that's just a learning that we've had, and we can talk about that at some point as well. When you're talking to a company about the benefits, or if there are any representatives from companies on the call, it's important to just understand the full picture of what a company gets when they partner with Open Avenues. So of course, the immigration solution is awesome and important, and you get to retain your foreign talent. But the foreign talent also are getting a massive leadership opportunity to lead students in these projects, to figure out how to manage a team, a small team on an introductory level project. These are really exciting ways that our fellows are able to build management skills and learn to really simplify what they're doing and talk about it in a new way when they're working with students. And lastly, our companies are able to build pipeline of diverse candidates. So at all of our partner universities, the students that are participating in our programming are really excited to be able to potentially apply for internships, apply for jobs, stay in touch with the companies in which they work on projects for. So this is an exciting piece of the programming. We just had 2 companies hire full-time employees who were students that worked on projects led by fellows. So we hope to increase those numbers as we move forward. And to apply for the program, we talked about these the two ways. Really, we're looking at nominations coming through from companies, and that's who we're scheduling consultations with. We unfortunately just don't have time to meet one-on-one with everyone. And that is, that's why we're gonna have, we'll increase the number of information sessions we'll have moving forward and hopefully get smaller numbers. So we're able to have a little more of an in-person Q&A like we've had in the past. But just given the fact that we're right after the lottery right now, and there's high demand for applicants to the program, only conversations we're going to be having are through the companies. And so we urge you to have companies reach out to us via this nomination. And then we also would like everyone to apply on the website as well and fill out that form. So that is the overview. We'll start taking questions. We leave a lot of room for questions because we know that this is new for many people and can be complex. So I hope I covered most of what you need to know about the program, but Erin is going to come on the screen as well, and she's going to facilitate a Q&A based off the questions that come through the chat. So please type any of the questions into the chat and we'll start a Q&A now. I have to unmute you. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. I was like, maybe if I charades it. Thanks, Danielle. Great to see everyone. Thanks for spending your time today with us. So a lot of the questions that came in, Danielle, are around eligibility. And so we'll get started in really jumping into some of those. First off, do you accept applicants who have degrees from outside the US? And could you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if individuals have a master's degree from outside of the United States, we will have to do an equivalency evaluation to make sure it's equivalent to a master's degree inside the United States. A couple of times we've seen, this just happened with a fellow from France. Her degree, just based off of the differences in the system, her master's degree was actually, it was equal to a bachelor's degree in the United States. So in that case, it was not a master's degree eligible, and it did count as a bachelor's degree. So that's, we do take international degrees, absolutely. We just have to do those evaluations. Oh.
And next up is the question around the types of degrees. So a lot of questions came in around this, and really wondering if you could clarify a little bit more on the types of fellows that are accepted into the program. Really a range of questions such as, do you need to have this STEM on the I-20? What other kind of degrees could it be? Is it only the ones that you see listed on the slides?
We are not working with only the degrees listed on the slides. Oftentimes, individuals have degrees that translate into a STEM field or a specialty occupation. So the most obvious example that I kept giving throughout this presentation was you have a software development degree and you work as a software developer, and it's the clearest cut H-1B you can have. We sponsor you as a software developer, but that's not always the case, right? Some folks might have a biomedical engineering degree and they're working as a research scientist. So they're as long as the degree relates to the type of work that you're doing, then that's a strong H-1B, and that is a good applicant to Open Avenues. We do want to see that it's in a STEM related field. We're monitoring to make sure that these fields have lots of job opportunities that students would be excited to apply for in the future. So that's what we're looking for. I wouldn't, we're not limited to specific fields. We don't say no. If, we had an industrial engineer come to us recently and we didn't have industrial engineering before, but there's certainly students that are interested in learning more about it. And so he was sponsored as an industrial engineering fellow. We're constantly adding new types of fellowships. So we are pretty flexible there within reason. There are some liberal arts fields that we're not really working in right now, that you might flex to think about it as a STEM field, and might be flex, but we are trying to sort of stay within traditional STEM. And Erin and I will do that evaluation, really looking at what our university partners are interested in for programming.
And great, some questions that are coming in are around the 2 years of work experience. And if teaching assistants, research assistantships, do they count? Could you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like?
Sure. Yeah, I think that, we can talk about the intricacies of that. I mean, we want to see that you have industry experience, right? What we're trying to put in front of students are leaders who have worked in the field before and can really impart that knowledge onto students who are thinking of going into that field. So we do like to see industry experience. I guess internships could be, counted towards that, but we certainly don't want to see just teaching assistant experience, because that's not going to help students think about how they do a technical interview or go into, how they would go through a hiring process at your company, or what your day-to-day looks like at the company. So the reason we put the requirement of experience is to make sure that we're putting industry professionals and who are able to advise students in that way.
When you're thinking of getting the employer on the call with us, who is the best individual from the employer to be on that call?
It's a great question. So, your hiring manager is the person most of you have built the closest relationship with, right? But it's not always the best person to be on the call. It actually typically will result in us having to have another call with HR or with the CEO or with the decision maker. So only you know how to navigate your own organizations, and this changes organization to organization. You need to think about who's making the decisions. And ideally, you go as high up as possible and you try to get that person on a call. We typically, I'd say most commonly, are talking to chief people officers or the head of HR, and they're the ones who are able to put this in front of senior leadership. For smaller companies, we're talking directly with the CEOs who have founded the company and are still invested in their talent and growth. So I'd say that's the difference. We would never just talk to a hiring manager and then sign a contract. Things have to be passed up.
And also thinking about the types of companies in which you sponsor, which you partner with, can corporation to corporation companies work with you?
Yes. So we've worked with public companies. We've worked with small startup companies. We're really open to any partnership. But as I said on that slide where I showed the partners, it's just much more common for us to partner with smaller companies that don't have immigration policies that are set in stone, where it's what we do for one, we do for all. I think that's been a big barrier with companies that I've met with in the past that have hundreds of foreign national employees and just don't think that they can offer this to one individual. The pricing's not a problem for those companies, but they certainly are just more risk averse when it comes to these things and less willing to partner with an innovative organization with a unique solution. So that's why, for anyone here that's looking for a job, we always say it's best to potentially look for an employer where you're able to prove your value, build relationships, and demonstrate your place at the organization and what you're able to offer so that they want to invest in you.
We're going to shift a little bit now to timeline and thinking about timeline of a process. If a company reaches out today, when can they expect to move forward? What does that timeline look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Erin and I are scheduling consultations when folks reach out for the next 2 weeks following. So I think those conversations they're happening pretty quickly. for companies that are nominating employees. After we have that initial intake, companies typically move forward pretty quickly. So we send over contracts and we collect information to do an evaluation within that week. And we can move forward and get people into the process within just a couple of weeks, starting on petition development, and then it's 6 to 8 weeks from there. So we always like when people reach out, at least 2 months ahead of their expiration date of OPT. But if there's a tight timeline, we've flexed in the past to make it work. Many of you have grace periods where, you might stop working, but you can certainly stay in the United States while we finish up a process for you if you're coming on board as a fellow.
Excellent. And there's also a ton of questions around timeline from the approval of the Open Avenues H-1B and what that looks like for the concurrent employer.
Sure. So Open Avenues, from the moment we contract, that's really when we start the 6 to 8 week timeline, because it means that we spend about 4 weeks developing the petitions with you, putting together the documents from our side. We scope projects for students and we take you through a lot of templates that we have to do that work. And when we file, it takes 15 days to get a response. Simultaneously, we work with your company to make sure that they're putting together their own Cap-Exempt H-1B petition that will be filed as soon as ours is approved. So at the end of those 6 to 8 weeks, your company is going to immediately, after they get the approval notice from us, file your concurrent Cap-Exempt H-1B visa for their company's full-time employment. We work with any law firm on that concurrent employment petition. Obviously, we work with Goldman and Partners Immigration Law, and we welcome anyone to work with them if they want to use them for the process. But we have multiple partner law firms that we work with on that concurrent petition and stay in touch with through the process to make sure we're aligned and that there's not a gap in employment at the end.
And thinking about concurrent petitions, have you seen any RFEs or rejections of those petitions?
So we didn't have any rejections of the concurrent petitions. The only RFEs that we saw were when the adjudication or the decision for the concurrent petition was not for a almost full year after it was filed. That concurrent petition does not need to be filed with premium processing, and you don't need to get an approval to start working. Actually, you can start working as soon as it's filed, which means that most of our partner companies are filing these without premium processing. And when it took so long for USCIS to get to it and actually review it, that was when we saw an RFB. They wanted the request for evidence. We had 2 of them. They both asked for the same thing. They wanted evidence that the individual was still working for Open Avenues Foundation, because we talked about the importance of demonstrating you are still employed by the Cap-Exempt employer for the concurrent petition to be approved. So in that case, we sent over the pay stubs, we sent over evidence that we'd worked with, that the individual had been working for us as a fellow for those 5 hours per week since then, and those were both fine. So that's the only request for evidence we've gotten on those concurrent petitions.
Excellent. And a couple of questions have come in, and I think it could be helpful just to revisit the salary share and talk a little bit more about those minimum salary requirements and how that works with the 5 hours per week.
Yeah. So in every state and every city within a state, there is a different wage level that has been deemed the fair prevailing wage. And Erin, maybe you can drop in the FLC wizard calculator, but there is this database where you can actually check within your city and state what the minimum fair prevailing wage for an employee within your specialty field is. So you can look up Massachusetts and you can look up software developer, and you can see that in your county, this is what individuals typically will get paid at a level 1 through level 4 wage. So there's an hourly wage there, and there's a full-time wage, an annual wage. And your full-time employer has to be paying that full-time annual wage. Open Avenues has to pay you at that hourly wage for your specialty field for 5 hours per week. So the way that we do that is we multiply that hourly wage by 5 hours per week. And we actually calculate that out so that that's deducted from what you get from your full-time employer, and they pay us that amount and we pay you.
And now to pivot and talk a little bit about time as a fellow and what that looks like. Some questions have come in really thinking about what those 5 hours look like, what the schedule looks like. Is it remote? What does the flexibility look like? A little bit more detail into that piece.
Sure. Yeah. So we're, the 5 hours per week, we're very aware that all of you have full-time jobs. We want this to be as flexible as possible. Obviously, everything's done remotely. So while Open Avenues started as an organization that put our fellows into classrooms in person at universities, COVID hit and we went fully remote with our educational programming. So all of our projects are launched online. So that means that our fellows are able to coordinate with the students and figure out times that work for the students to meet with them. A lot of our fellows work weekends. A lot of them are working after work or after school for students and finding those times that work best to meet. There are some meetings for Open Avenues that are mandatory and might be, at 5 p.m. during the workday. We try not to make those interfere too much with your work calendars, but this is employment. I mean, this is an opportunity to work for 5 hours per week as an employee of Open Avenues, and there are commitments with that. So there's a balance there. We try to strike it and support foreign nationals to make sure they're able to maintain their busy calendars.
And there's some questions around if I was a fellow with Open Avenues and I decided to change employers, what would that look like?
Great question. So as long as you maintain the baseline remember we talked about that baseline, as long as you maintain the baseline employment with Open Avenues on the Cap-Exempt H-1B, any full-time employer is able to then sponsor your Cap-Exempt H-1B concurrent visa. So technically you can go and you can find another employer to sponsor that piggyback H-1B. They just need to be willing to take on the program fees and the salary share component and contract with Open Avenues. Now we are conscious that we're partnered with your full-time employer that we first contracted with, right? So to avoid conflict of interest, we sort that out in a really delicate way, but it's possible to move employers. Yes.
And if I was picked in the lottery, what would that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, we just had about 35 to 40% of our cohort win the lottery this year. That's super exciting for us. That means that we did our jobs well. We were able to bring fellows in, keep them in our program, and help them get to that next lottery. That's the goal. So that means that individuals who were just selected, they will exit or graduate our program on October 1st. So you stay in our program for minimum of 6 months until the next October, when you then have your company file a regular H-1B for you. And at that point, you transition only to that H-1B. You leave Open Avenues as an employer, and you're no longer on a Cap-Exempt H-1B. It does count. The Cap-Exempt H-1B time you spend on our visa counts towards your 6 years of H-1B employment in the United States.
And what is the average size of the projects in terms of student numbers?
Yeah, there's about 4 students on a project. We've done 6 in the past. This summer, we're doing 2 students on a project. We're paying students a little bit more, and we're going to require a little bit more time from the students, and it'll be a longer project for them. And that's why we're doing just 2 students. So again, it's not a fellow getting in front of a class of 100 giving a lecture. That's not what we're talking about for this fellowship. It's actually working with a small group of students to have them take a project from start to finish that they can put on their resume.
And how many fellows do you plan on having in the fellowship this year?
The $1 million question. So Open Avenues currently has a cohort of 35. We have projected that we'll take on a cohort to get to 80 this year. So that meant, so we just had, about 25 folks win the lottery, and we'll be exiting our program in October. So we do think we'll be able to take on around 50 individuals in the next year. And by year, I mean till the end of 2022.
And as far as the work hours, can I work 40 hours for my full-time employer and still work those 5 hours for you? Or is that going over what I should be working?
Yeah, absolutely. You're working full-time for your company. They're going to file a full-time 40-hour per week H-1B for you. And if you work more for either employer, that's okay. You just need to be, as you know, that happens. You just need to be getting paid the fair wage for your work on an annual salary or on our 5-hour per week salary. We keep everyone's employment within the 5 hours per week. That's why we pay you 5 hours per week. But your full-time employer is putting you filing a full-time visa, and that's okay. We have some, folks who are working for startups working 50, 60, 70-hour weeks, maybe more. I turn my head. I don't want to hear if they're working more. That's just so much work. But they certainly are, and it's okay.
And how do folks apply if they are founders, co-founders, entrepreneurs?
Yeah, good question. So for a founder to be eligible for a cap-exempt H-1B, you have to also be eligible for an H-1B. And to be eligible for an H-1B as a founder, you need to have certain things in place. You have to have a consultation with an immigration attorney to make sure that you have your company has, for example, control over your employment. You don't own more than 50% of the company. The company is able to fire you. You have in your articles of incorporation, that's written clearly that you are able to be fired by your company, and that you have someone who's controlling your employment at the organization. You also have to demonstrate that your company can pay you the wage, so you have to have funding. And we certainly, because of our pricing and the way we work, we certainly want to see that the company has funding as well. And a comfortable runway so that we're not running into financial trouble with our partner organization. So it's possible. We've worked with founders before, and we're happy to work with them again, but we certainly have to make sure that you're eligible for an H-1B.
What are the chances of accepting an application from someone without a master's degree? And if it's 0, what could be some other ways to work for an employer willing to sponsor?
Yeah. So right now, for the next month or two, we're not working with individuals with bachelor's degrees. We have a couple of people we're taking through the process now. We want to see how that goes, and then we'll figure out if we're going to open it up to others. So if it's a easy process and there are no issues, we're going to open it up at that point. But right now, we've just reached the limit of bachelor's candidates that we can take on as an organization without doing this extra step in the process that we're going to move forward with a couple of companies we had already contracted with. So you can stay in touch with us in a couple of months. I know that's not helpful for folks that have July or June expiration dates on OPT. What else can you do? You can look to see if there's any other university that you could potentially work for 5. Maybe you've built a really good relationship with the professor. Again, even at any of these cap-exempt organizations, you want to go as high as possible and administration. Sometimes the smaller schools might have, more flexibility in terms of sponsorship. Larger schools also might have more protocols in terms of who they sponsor for a cap-exempt H-1B, but you never know. I mean, look up some other cap-exempt organizations and see how this goes. If not, stay in touch with us. In a few months, we might be opening it back up.
How long could I stay in the program?
Yep, I forgot to mention that. We file 3-year visas for our foreign national fellows, and we are able to extend that if necessary.
And also, could you tell us a little bit about once someone exits the program, would they be eligible for cap-exempt H-1Bs in the future?
Interesting. So I think that when most people exit the program, they're going on to another visa solution, and they wouldn't need a cap-exempt H-1B. If you're going on to an H-1B because you won the lottery, you never have to, you're always going to be counted against that cap. and you have H-1B portability. You can go to another H-1B employer with that H-1B visa that you now received through the lottery cycle. So you won't need an H-1B cap exempt again. You go to an O-1, you don't need a cap exempt H-1B again. I can't think of a scenario where you would, but if you can think of one, then email me and we can talk about it.
And there's some questions regarding timeline and when would really be the best time to engage with us. And so a case example could be if a visa is expiring in January, what would that look like when when should they reach out?
Yeah, great question. So we love when people are thinking ahead. It's the best. I recommend getting in touch with us, maybe 6 months before, just because we're projecting out how many fellows we're going to have in the program. If you have that type of leeway and runway before your visa is expiring, get in touch with us. Tell us you're planning on applying for the program. Doesn't hurt for us to have a conversation with your employer 6 months ahead. I've talked to folks a year ahead. Their employer is like, we know this is the individual's last chance. They have one more next year, and if they lose, we're going to lose them. So I'm happy to have those conversations. Erin and I can have that consultation at any point if the company reaches out. So definitely sooner is better. And then of course we talked about, really leaving that 2 months ahead of time for us to do the petition process.
Is there any deadline for applying to the fellowship?
We're rolling, no deadline. People come in throughout the year. We have at least 1 or 2 fellows every single month. Even the month of the lottery, we had fellows coming into the program. So yeah, any time of year.
And there's a question that came in around, would this be a possibility if they were waiting to be reinstated into F1 status?
Waiting to be reinstated into F1 status. So we have a 6-month minimum in the program. So you have to come into our program with the intention that you're going to stay in it for at least those 6 months and that you're going to be employed during that time. So if there's a gap in your F1 status and you're working for an employer that is willing to sponsor you for a cap-exempt H-1B, and that gap is longer than 6 months, then sure. But I've never heard of a scenario like that where that gap would be that significant and that you would have demonstrated at that point to an employer that they should sponsor you for this opportunity because you're going back to school. Typically, when a company is going to invest in this, they're going to do it because you're there for this foreseeable future. I can't see a company partnering with us to do this for someone that's going to go back to school. Did that make sense? I hope so.
Let us know your questions. And can we have dependents while we're on cap-exempt H-1B?
Yeah, so dependent, yep, you can have H-4, spouses or children on H-4. Again, specific work authorization requirements for H-4 that we won't get into now, but it's not an ideal scenario. So if it's possible, if they have their own visa solution, great. If not, they're able to be on an H-4, certainly in the United States and stay here.
So this question is around how this counts into the total 6 years. And so the case example is if we file for the 3-year, but I graduate after 6 months, you would file a withdrawal and only 6 months would be counted towards those 6 years. Is that correct? Or could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Right. So the time spent in cap-exempt H-1B from the moment you're approved and it has the date on your LCA, the labor certification, that is when the clock against your 6 years starts ticking. So if you're in the program for 6 months in the fellowship program and your cap-exempt H-1B is approved for 6 months, then great. That's going to be 6 months towards those 6 years and you have 5.5 years left. So pretty straightforward. If you're in our program for 2 years, you're going to have 4 years left in your total amount of H-1B status. Of course, if you have a green card pending at the end, by the end of those 6 years and you've reached a certain place in the green card process, you can continue to extend the H-1B, and that's important for Indian nationals and Chinese nationals to know. I don't have so much more information on that green card process. I'm not an immigration attorney, but immigration attorneys will tell you more about what you should think about in terms of green cards and extending H-1B beyond those 6 years.
And how many hours is it possible to work in H-1B status?
I don't know if we know, I don't think there's a hard number. This is a little bit of gray space, and it's up to USCIS to make that decision. I mean, what I've heard from the attorneys is that it doesn't make any sense. It's really what's humanly possible, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense to be in 2 full-time jobs and then a 5-hour per week concurrent visa. Like, it doesn't make sense to have 150 hours of work a week, or it doesn't really make sense even to have, I don't know, they might flag it at 100 hours of work per week, right? So I think, it's safe to say that Open Avenues and Jeff, when he first created the model, went to USCIS, they approved the idea of the 5 to 8 hours per week of part-time employment in addition to full-time employment. So we know that works.
And a couple of questions have come in. If we could go over the pricing structure again.
Sure. So initial fee is $16,000 for the program. That's a one-time fee. It's not year over year. That's paid out immediately upon contracting with Open Avenues and includes the Open Avenues Cap-Exempt H-1B work visa, the premium processing, government filing fees, an additional government fee that we're subject to based on our size, and allows us to put together the projects. So there's a lot that goes into that initial petition, and that's why that price is what it is. And then we have a $3,500 quarterly fee for as long as you're in the program for. The salary share is something that that is not an additional fee. We talked through that already in the Q&A, but it shouldn't be considered as such, but it is in the contract, so it's worth bringing up to employers. Yeah, I see someone just wrote that there was a $12,000 fee. It is $16,000. There was a recent increase in our pricing that went right to the initiation fee because of an additional fee that we get charged based on our size right now to the government. So we're covering that in that additional increase in fee for the initiation.
And how can we stay connected to the program? How can we ask more questions? What does that look like?
Yep. So you can stay connected on LinkedIn. I think we're most active on LinkedIn. We have an Instagram where we post a lot about our fellows and the work that they're doing and the educational work. So it's cool to see more programmatic stuff on Instagram and Twitter. But certainly stay connected on LinkedIn. I'm trying to answer all messages on LinkedIn as they come in. So I'd say that's definitely the best way. We also, on our website, there is a way to sign up for a newsletter. We're going to start launching those with more updates about our programming. So you can look at our website. There's a form to fill out on our footer, I believe, where you can sign up for that, for updates from Open Avenues.
I think we're up to date with the questions.
Nice. Awesome. I have all this recorded. I'll save the chat. If anything comes up that we didn't get to address, I will try to answer it in a response to everybody and send this recording along with any extra questions from the Q&A. So really appreciate everyone's time today. I hope we got to most of your questions. I know there's a lot coming through. And I hope that you find your next step on your immigration path. And if Open Avenues can be part of it, that's fantastic. All right, stay in touch with us. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.